Welcome to the Reality Check. Your host, Ben Shanneman, here with you. And I took the extra time today to get the whole world over my shoulder. Now, today, February 20th, George Orwell once said, early in my life, I noticed that no event is ever correctly reported in a newspaper. And that, I'm sure, was true for when he said it. And if something could be more true, now would be that case. More true. Right? The school shooting, Douglas High, in Florida. I think the 5-man electrical band said it. At one point, they said it correct. And after them, Tesla said it again. And it was signs, signs, everywhere there's signs. That song. Now, we know there's bad laws and policies. And yes, there are limits to the Second Amendment. We definitely should have limits, tighter background checks. Although we have background checks, no problem if they're tighter, banning certain things. Not a problem with that to a point. But really, they talk about banning guns. So, for instance, let's say the guy had a pistol and shot 5 or 6 people. Would that be okay? If he had a knife and stabbed 4 or 5 people, would that be okay? Doesn't make it any better. People, like crews that want to do this stuff, are going to do this stuff. Can we make it harder? Yeah, we should try. But there are other things that we have to look at. Other areas and other cause and effect to this that we need to analyze. Think about it. If you want to just talk about guns, your biggest gun-free zones, what you have, Chicago, Detroit, D.C., and gun-free zones like schools and all that. Where do you think the majority of gun violence and gun crimes happen? Chicago, Detroit, gun-free zones, Washington, D.C. There's more gun crime in those areas, almost as much as the whole country. If you put together all the free zones. And why is that? Because they know the innocent are to be less protected. And what they want when you're a criminal is to have people that aren't protected, easy prey, right? It's as simple as back in the day when you had the silly looking club on your car. Is the club going to stop anybody? If you had a Lamborghini or you had a Ferrari, is it going to stop them from stealing it? No. But in general, a club will stop most criminals just because they don't want to have to deal with the extra time and the extra hassle. They'll just go to the next car because it didn't have the club and they'll rob that one. Simple enough. So that's what it is. It's not a stopper, it's a deterrent. It makes something more difficult, makes people think twice about it. You look at kids back in the day, they had guns, half the kids had them in their pickup truck. Nobody thought about them. Nobody was showing them their friend like it was something unique. Most people didn't care. But yeah, today, now the amount of shootings is, skyrocketed. I think in the last decade, how much it skyrocketed. Why has the behavior changed? Many factors. That coddling we do to the kids, the babying, the telling kids and criminals alike, older people that are criminals, it's okay when they do something wrong. Oh, you hurt somebody, you did this, you did that. It's okay, everything's okay. There has to be a point in time where there's some accountability. And then, it's everything, everybody wins. You're telling somebody their whole life they win. And then when they realize, and you look at a lot of these people are misfits that do this stuff, did they realize they just lost in life, that what they've been told that they're winning all the time, that they won, that they're this, that they're that it's just, they know it's not true. They know somebody feeding them, a line. And other factors you have video games, you have the violent movies and TV, and the legal drugs. The legal drugs are, to me, that's, one of the key ones. If you look at all the serial shooters, not just schools, but, in the recent history, you look at some of the big things they had, and a lot of it is, you'll hear about the video games, which I think that's a huge culprit, but the legal drugs. How many of these people are on some kind of antidepressant or this suppressant or that drug? They're getting these things prescribed from doctors like candy. 20 years ago, they weren't prescribed as much. They're putting, it's like you hear it every day. TV. This will cure your, if you have a weak arm, this will cure it. But the side effects, you'll bleed from this, bleed from that, and whatnot. And, you look at all the side effects. You're going to lose your hair. You're going to lose your voice. You may have a heart attack. And that's worse than the actual first problem that you had in the first place. So, most of these new drugs now you see, that's what it is. What is the FDA, I guess? What are they putting out there? What are they letting us have as drugs? It's simply acceptable. There are more side effects than cures. And Ellie says, so why are we even legalizing this stuff and letting it be just put out in the in the truckload? Well, we know it's all about the money. But sadly, a lot of people are getting killed over this. So the drugs are, to me, one of the hugest things. It's almost common in every one of these guys who are taking one of these drugs. They don't worry. How many people even look at suicides? And another part of deaths, suicides. How many of these people are on legalized drugs? It's not good from the side effects are horrible. And in this case, we know all the signs were missed. We know, like Jared Leffner here, Holmes, you look at these people, social media, you look at the way they acted, how many people complained about them. Intervention teams were coming, and people backed away because they're scared and get in trouble for saying something about somebody. As society, you can't criticize anybody or you're the bad guy. And that's it. So these people get away with it because other people are too scared to step up. And unfortunately, this is what you get. You get a society with no checks and balances for these people. You know what they're saying they're going to do. Everybody sees it. It was undeniable. Even the kids at the school were joking, yeah, this is the guy that's going to do it. And deep down inside, they knew. I was picking up this article right here. And it's Are Video Games Breeding an Assassination Generation? So imagine your child or grandson or your niece or nephew or your child's friend have gone off to school, the mall, or the theater. Hours later, you hear a breaking news story. Every parent in the United States fears the most. Shooting in progress. In March of 1998, that parent was me. And this is an article written by Lieutenant Colonel David Grossman. He was a retired lieutenant colonel at the time. His youngest son, Joe, was in the middle of the school in Jonesboro, Arkansas. He got a call from his aunt in Florida. Is that Joe's school on the news? The story was on every channel. Mass murder in Jonesboro Middle School. And I cannot describe the magnitude of the horror I felt. I rushed to Joe's school with fear gripping in my heart, only to find out it wasn't my son's school that was under attack. This mass murder took place at the other middle school in town. In a flash, I felt relief and then outrage. I learned a little later that two boys, 11 and 13, opened fire, gunning down 13 little girls and 2 teachers after a fire alarm trapped them outside the building. How could this happen in my own city? How does this continue to happen with sickening regularity? So Lieutenant Colonel David Grossman was a soldier of 24 years service. He served as a paratrooper, Army Ranger, West Point psychology professor, and a professor of military science. So until that moment in Jonesboro, my life's work had been to uncover the dynamics of killing on the battlefield. I have offered several successful books on this topic, books which have become required reading in the U.S. Marine Corps, the DEA Academy, U.S. Marshals Academy, and hundreds of others academy and military organizations worldwide. By now, I shifted my focus from what happens on the battlefield to understanding the cause of the current wave of violence that is so commonplace in our society. His new book was Assassination Generation, and it's the accumulation of this endeavor. The massacre at Jonesboro was followed by those at Pearl, Paducah, Springfield, Littleton, Edinburgh, Santee, San Diego, Moses Lake, Bethel, Red Lake, Sparks, Centennial, Trousdale, Marysville, Saskatchewan, and elsewhere. There was a Sandy Hook Elementary School, Virginia Tech, Northern Illinois University, Louisiana Vocational Tech, University of Cal Santa Barbara, Northern, the one we had here locally at NAU, and a movie theater in Aurora, Colorado, church in Charleston, South Carolina, and the nightclub, Pulse Club in Orlando, Florida. After the in-depth investigation, the New York Times found out that these mass murders occur on average more than once every single day in the United States. In 2015, mass shootings resulted in 462 dead and 1,314 wounded people. So today we put armed cops in our schools along with lockdown drills, metal detectors, and video cameras. And yet, in 2013, there were still 53 school-related violent deaths. Violence is the most likely cause of death among children who die at school. Because we should not blindly accept it as a normal that we put thousands of cops in our schools to stop our kids from killing each other. Never lose your sense of outrage. Many factors contribute to youth violence, including poverty, drugs, gangs, and mental illness. But the American Academy of Pediatrics have made it explicitly clear that violent TV movies and, worst of all, video games are the single most easily remediable contributing factor to violence in our society. This is not a new revelation. As early as 1994, 4 years before Jonesboro, the American Psychological Association released a resolution on the undeniable link between media violence and actual violence. Viewing mass media violence leads to increase in aggression, attitudes, values, and behavior, particularly in children. It has a lifelong effect on behavior and personality, including criminal behavior. In 2005, and again in 2015, the APA issued further resolutions in which they noted that the link between violent video game exposure and aggressive behavior is one of the most studied and established. Scientific research has demonstrated as an association between violent game use and both increases in aggressive behavior, aggressive affect, aggressive cognitions, and decreases in pro-social behavior, empathy, and moral engagement. On September 23rd, a man murdered 5 people in a shopping mall in Oak Harbor, Washington. Victims included a 64-year-old woman and a 95-year-old, a 16-year-old cancer survivor, and a man who died protecting his wife with his body. News reporters said the killer logged more than 100 hours in the past 2 weeks playing the violent first-player shooter game called Call of Duty. Incredibly, the same log shows that this mass murderer returned from his crime and logged back into the games, while a manhunt for the suspect was underway. So the basic is we need to regulate children's access to violent media just like we regulate their access to cigarettes, alcohol, pornography. There are 2 avenues of change, liberal and legal. Now, we've seen some research on it. Obviously, the article went over that. And definitely, if you look at it, one of the factors, like I said before, we had guns in schools. And there wasn't that much of shooting. Like back in the day, kids had a problem. You fought it out, and that's it. You were done, and the rest of the town kind of policed that. You're done, that's it. You know what? You two guys can not get along, you can get along, but let's just stop all this nonsense. And that was it. Each community almost policed itself. And now you have somebody looks at somebody the wrong way, and they're going to bring a gun to school. Or just people. How many people, even this week, there was another one in Arizona, somebody just brought a gun to school for whatever reason. Like, I don't know. Definitely, it seems more commonplace, like they don't care. And like I said, between these legal drugs that kids are getting pushed, they're getting pushed on the kids by doctors just trying to make money, and they don't care less than parents who, whether it's the single parent or the 2 parents that don't care as much, they don't have time to do the research or want to do the research, or they don't say no to doctors, and they let their doctors push the stuff on their kids. Between the drugs and the video games. And usually when these kids are drugged up, they're not very active, so they're at home watching violent TV shows and playing violent video games. and they pretty much get brainwashed, and this is what they think is the norm, and they go out and do it. And just like that last example, the kid's back home playing video games after he just murdered people, because to him it's nothing but normal business, you know. And on the topic of guns and gun research, in the wake of the Sandy Hook tragedy, former President Barack Obama issued a list of executive orders. Notably among them was the CDC, Center for Disease Control, was given $10 million to research gun violence. Now, of course, he didn't take that out of his own pocket. That was your money and my money, our taxpayer money. So year after year, those who oppose even modest gun safety measures have threatened to defund scientific or media research into the cause of gun violence. I will direct the Centers for Disease Control to go ahead and study the best ways to reduce it, Obama said. As a result, the 1996 congressional ban on research by the CDC to advocate or promote gun control was lifted. Finally, anti-gun proponents, and presumably the Obama administration, thought gun owners and the NRA would meet the irrefutable scientific evidence to support why guns made America less safe. Mainstream media outlets praised the order to lift the ban and lambasted the NRA and Congress for having put it in place. It was an executive order that NRA should fear the most. The CDC ban on gun research caused lasting damage. Salon, communist organization, said the ban was part of the NRA's war on gun science. CBS News lamented that the NRA stymied CDC research. Mainstream media journalists argued that NRA's opposition to the CDC gun research demonstrated its fear of being contradicted by science. Few, if any, cited why the NRA may have had legitimate concerns. The culture of the CDC at the time could hardly be described as lacking bias on firearms. We need to revolutionize the way we look at guns, like we did with cigarettes. Dr. Mark Rosenberg, who oversaw the CDC gun research, told the Washington Post in '94, now smoking is dirty, deadly, and banned. Didn't Rosenberg sound like a man who should be trusted to conduct taxpayer-funded studies on guns? Well, anyway, to make this short, here are some of the key findings of the CDC report. Now, I'll tell you, there was so much happiness, as you heard, but this report never saw the light of day. And some of the key things I found out is armed citizens are less likely to be injured by attacker. Studies that directly assess the effect of actual defense uses of guns, i.e. incidents in which a gun was used by a crime victim in the sense of attacking or threatening the offender, have found consistently lower injury rates among gun-using crime victims compared with victims who used other self-protective strategies. Defensive uses of guns are common. Almost all national surveys indicates that defensive gun uses by victims are at least as common as offensive uses by criminals, which estimates of annual uses ranging from about 500,000 to more than 3 million per year, in context of the 300,000 violent crimes involving firearms in 2000. Mass shootings and accidental firearm deaths account for a small fraction of gun-related deaths, and both are declining. The number of public mass shootings of the type that occurred at Sandy Hook Elementary School accounted for a small fraction of firearm-related deaths. Since 1983, there have been 78 events in which 4 or more individuals were killed by a single perpetrator in one day in the United States, resulting in 547 victims and 476 injured persons. The report also notes, unintentional firearm-related deaths have steadily declined during the past century. The number of unintentional deaths due to firearms-related incidents accounted for less than 1% of all unintentional fatalities in 2010. A lot of it has to do with the news. Happened before, nobody really reported on it. Now, one, there's way more ways to get news. News gets out quicker, and it catches you. And they can skew it whichever way they want. If they don't want to hear about something, they don't cover it. If they want you to hear about something, they cover it and cover it more. And they all have the same type of story. Interventions, such as background checks, so-called assault rifle bans and guns, free zone produced mixed results. Where the gun restrictions reduce firearm-related violence, is an unresolved issue. The report could not conclude whether passage of right to carry laws decrease or increase violent crimes. Well, obviously we know the CDC did this report. So if they're saying they can't even figure that out, it's because they didn't want to tell you it's a lot worse than what they thought. As you know, Chicago, Detroit, DC, and the gun-free zones, like I've told you about, you look it up, those are the places where people get most attacked, most murdered. The crime rates are crazy, out of control. You look at Arizona, we're allowed to protect ourselves. If you could cut off all the crime that comes straight up from Mexico, because a lot of people that are leaving there, I know, people don't want to hear this, but a lot of people leaving there are criminals themselves, and they're trying to avoid getting prosecuted in Mexico because it's way worse than they come up here. I'm not saying it's a majority of people that come up, but if you could take out all those crimes, I'm saying, you would see there's not a super lot of a criminal activity here that's that violent. Not saying there isn't some, there is, but it's not as bad as Detroit, Chicago, the gun-free zones, DC. That's because people here have guns, and people know that. I'm telling you, they want to do a real test. They should take a rotten neighborhood, and they should put signs on every house has a gun. This house has 5 guns. This house has no guns. This house has 3 guns. This house has 4 people that have concealed carry permits. Put that on each house's front lawn, and you'll see who gets robbed. Trust me. It's like these clowns. They're always crying about stuff. The ACLU. When they get robbed, who do they call? They call the guys with the guns the police. The problem is, no matter how good our police are, is in general, all police are historical fact recorders. Because by the time a policeman can get there, you're already going to be shot, or you have defended yourself at that time. So all the police are there is to take down the facts and write the reports. Unfortunately, you're the only one who can protect you. So now, gun buyback, back to the report from the CDC, gun buyback and turn-in programs are ineffective in reducing crime. There is empirical evidence that the gun turn-in programs are ineffective, as noted in the 2005 NRC study of firearms and violence, a critical review. For example, in 2009, an estimated 310 million guns were available to civilians in the United States. But gun buyback programs typically recovered less than 1,000 guns. On a local level, buybacks may increase awareness of firearm violence. However, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, for example, gun recovery and the buyback were not the same as guns that most often used in homicides and suicides. Stolen guns and retail/gun show purchases account for very little crime. More recent prisoner surveys suggest that stolen guns account for only a small percentage of gun use and by convicted criminals. According to a 1997 survey of inmates, approximately 70% of guns used or possessed by criminals at the time of their arrest came from family or friends, drug dealers, street purchases, or underground market. Which is, again, if you take away guns for people who follow the law, that won't stop any of these people who, it shows you, 70% of these criminals get their guns from drug dealers, street purchases, underground market, or they swipe it from family and friends. So they don't get their guns legally. Now, the vast majority of gun-related deaths are not homicides but suicides. Between the years 2000 and 2010, firearm-related suicides significantly outnumbered homicides of all age groups, annually accounting for 61% of the more than 335,600 people who died from firearm-related violence in the United States. Now, we know nobody heard of this report because the CDC was surprised by the results they had, and it didn't further what the Obama administration was paying our money to find out. So they didn't care to share with you what they found out because it wasn't what they wanted to find out. So they wasted our money running a report for no reason at all. Well, the reason was to prove something. It's like the Fast and Furious operation. It was to overrun the Second Amendment and say how careless America is, and our guns are everywhere. And, at the end of the day, all it led to is dead Americans, dead Mexicans, and more guns in the street. Now, let's get to what we have here. Chill blowout. There will be everything you need from tools, baseball cards, football cards, books, glassware, kitchenware, toys, clothes, records, furniture, electronics, and much, much more. With over 12 tables and the yard, we'll have stuff, cheap stuff, and pricey stuff. 1715 West 6th Street. That's Mesa, Arizona. Dobson Road, University. This Saturday, February 25th, a.m. to 3 p.m. Stop wasting money and time waiting in lines. Shop here early and often. Now, you know, when Obama was president, he didn't talk to the other side of the aisle much, not like his buddy John McShane. But Obama certainly had no problem listening into their phone calls, right? That's the little humor there. Now, let's see here. Let's talk about some... we'll do news headlines in a minute or two. You know, spring training's open up. I actually, if you don't know, I live right down the block from where the Chicago Cubs have spring training, so that's starting to get a buzz on there. They're selling merchandise and they're ready. And I was hoping to see Obama pull up because he did sign with the Chicago Cubs, right? That's why he had that portrait made, the portrait that was made in China, with him in the ivy in center field, sitting on a chair because he's that good of an athlete. He could just reach up and catch balls. Is that right? No? He didn't sign with the Cubs? Oh, am I wrong? Oh, well. Anyways, new evidence suggests that a former top staffer for Senator Dianne Feinstein, Democrat, California, and criminal in Arizona as well, yes, she is, maybe directing the post-election efforts of Fusion GPS. A Democrat-linked political opposition research firm to demos alleging illegal collusion between Donald Trump campaign and Russian officials. Now, the congressional document text between Senator Mark Warren, Democrat, Virginia, and a registered foreign agent for a Russian aluminum oligarch indicate that Donald J. Jones is intimately involved with ongoing efforts to retroactively validate a series of salacious and unverified memos produced by Christopher Steele, a former British intelligence agent at Fusion GPS. The dossier, which declassified documents show was used as a basis for securing wiretaps and Trump campaign affiliates, was reportedly jointly funded by the DNC, Democrat National Committee, and Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. The former Feinstein staffer participation in ongoing efforts to retroactively validate the dossier was first publicly hinted at in January in several inquiry letters from Senator Chuck Grassley, Republican from Iowa, chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican, I'm not really sure about that, South Carolina, to various Democratic Party leaders who were likely responsible for funding Fusion GPS's 2016 dossier work, including John Podesta, Donna Brazil, and Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Understanding the extent of the DNC's knowledge of and interactions with Mr. Steele and others in Fusion GPS work is essential to this inquiry, the two senators wrote. And in light of this, by February 8th, 2018, they wanted to answer questions for requested documents. So it's the first time that Jones's name has appeared publicly mentioned in connection with the dossier. With all the communications between the letters, recipients, and a host of characters involved with the dossier and its financing, creation, and dissemination. You know, it's a lot interesting that some of the names are on there and they wanted to learn about them. You know, it's a lot of collusion, you see, and this is the Dems collusion. Still trying to prove these facts true, which they were already, they were sold a joke bill of goods. We know it was fake stuff, it was ridiculous stuff, it was stuff for a reaction. The fact that they actually paid for this stuff, I don't know. It just shows how dumb and people think that Hillary Clinton's qualified for anything. Now, speaking of Mueller, we had the indictments last week of people that he knows are never going to be arrested or anything. Just a waste of time. And today, he, like they say, you can indict a ham sandwich if you want. You have some lawyer that lied about whatever. They don't even tell you any specifics. The Flynn indictment's going to get thrown out. Mueller was caught being dishonest. Mueller's the same guy that worked with, Lois Lerner and IRS to target conservatives, right? We know Mueller is very shady. Very shady. If you remember, we know that the IRS was guilty, right, of attacking Tea Party and conservative groups. It's a fact. The corruption that in 2010 there was a meeting between Lois Lerner, DOJ officials, and the FBI to plan for a possible criminal prosecution of targeting nonprofit organizations for alleged illegal political activity. Obama's DOJ wanted IRS employees who were going to testify to Congress to turn over documents to the DOJ and the Congress because they knew they did something wrong. Obama's IRS gave the FBI 21 computer disks containing 1.25 million pages of confidential IRS returns from 113,000 nonprofit social and welfare groups. Nearly every 501c4 in the United States as part of its prosecution effort, according to a letter from the then House Oversight Committee Chairman Darrell Issa, Republican California, to Kosaknen. Which relatively likely means that the IRS, including possibly Lois Lerner, violated federal tax law by transmitting this information to the Justice Department. Another scam that Mueller was involved in. I mean, they knew they were getting illegal stuff. They didn't care. They violate every law, and this guy's supposed to be the honest cop. Let's see. This week we had that clown McMaster's babbling. I don't want to say I, but I just don't understand. Two of the dumbest things that Trump done in the last week. One, McMaster's is not fired. This guy just needs to go. He's an Obama-loving communist. And then two, I can't believe he actually said Mitt Romney was good. I don't know what the point of that. Like, doesn't he know that Mitt Romney's just going to stab him in the back again? I mean, I know he's trying to make peace and whatever. There's some people that no, absolutely not. Let's see. This week, it just came out that the UN, which I say we should have, UN aid workers have committed 60,000 rapes in the last. Now, they say it's a shock report. It isn't really. It's not, because the UN is just worthless. 3,300 pedophiles are working within the agency of the UN. That's the estimated number of pedophiles they have on staff. I mean, can you imagine? What do you expect? I'm sure they don't check these people. And then you got to think about where they do their work. A place like Africa. I mean, think about it. If 1 out of every 10 gets reported, that's probably, it's probably more than, that's likely, you're lucky to get 1 out of every 10 reported. So that's kind of where they know how many have been reported, and they kind of just assume there's more. But I mean, think about it. If even 6,000 are reported, they're assuming there's 6 is probably even more. And that doesn't include the people that attempted to try or whatnot, Unfortunately, just the UN, we need to get out of it. So another thing back to Mueller, we'll flip on and off from him. So you had 13 Russian nationals, which will never come to the U.S., which it was just a joke. There are people, they pretended to be other people on Facebook and start for and against rally. They aided a good old Bernie Sanders, which now all of a sudden he has nothing to say about that. But where is the indictment for the British national XM16 agent who directly conspired to interfere with the 2016 election? We know Christopher Steele, where's his indictment? Because he did much more than all 13 of those Russians combined. And I have no problem with them being indicted. But what about everybody else? What about, we'll go into more, but let's see, Jake Flapper from CNN, $4 million house. Very fun. Half these guys, when they buy houses, they don't buy them in their names. They either hide it through a corporation, lawyer. But it's funny. A guy who makes, what does he make? I don't know, a few $100,000 a year, and he bought a $4 million house. Interesting. Very interesting. Sure, it'll come out that a lot of these news people are getting paid off the books for other things, And it ain't advertising Cherry Coke Zero, let me tell you. Pretty funny. Let's see here. So, 2015, Clinton's 96% of all the donations the Clinton family had went to their own foundation. The same foundation, which 78% went to administration costs,